This might be a little embarrassing for me to admit, but I have never tasted the IKEA Swedish meatballs. I know everybody raves about them. I've never had them, but what I have had is the best Swedish meatballs in the world. Welcome to the Salt and Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today I'm going to show you how to make the best Swedish meatballs in the world. Well, anyway, in my world, okay? I've been eating Swedish meatballs since I was about this high. My mom made them all the time. I don't think she used the ingredients that I'm going to use, but they were delicious. These are better. They are the best I've ever had. You're going to love them, and they're super easy to make. Whether you want to make them in the Ninja Foodie using pressure cooker or not, that's the method I'm going to show you today, but you could just as easily follow the recipe and make them on the stove. And I'll go over all those details in my written post on thesaltedpepper.com. But let's get started first. Okay, I'm gonna use the 6.5 quart. This is the OL501 Ninja Foodie. We're using pressure cook, so any pressure cooker will work. No problems if you have an Instant Pot. Any size will work for this. You want at least a 6.5 quart if you want to cook either potatoes on top or pasta on top. Like egg noodles is kind of common to serve with Swedish meatballs in the US anyway. So if you want to cook a layered meal, you're going to need a 6.5 quart or bigger. But you can do the meatballs in any size, okay? All right, first, let's get the meatballs made. These are completely homemade from scratch. Can you use the bag frozen kind? Yes, you can. You're going to do things just a little bit different. So I will go over that in the written post as well, okay? Because you're not going to have the flavor and the juices from the meatballs sauteing to make the roux. So you're going to have to do that a little different. But it's real easy. So yes, you can use those. For me, I'm using 1 pound of 80/20 ground beef and 1 pound of ground pork. The two different meats are pretty traditional. I don't know though if my mom used two different meats. She probably just used all ground beef, and that is okay. However, the pork does add more fat to the meatball. I think it gives it a better texture, a better flavor, and it's pretty magical, okay? This is the first recipe for Swedish meatballs that I've ever made using the combination of pork and ground beef, and it's amazing. So really, I urge you to give it a try. You don't have to use 2 pounds though. If you want to cut the recipe in half, use a 1/2 pound of ground beef, 1/2 pound of pork, okay? All right, now for the additions, we're gonna add in 1 large egg, a 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. Now, if you wanted to make these keto, you can do that as well. You're gonna omit the breadcrumbs and you're going to omit the cream because you don't want them to be too wet. If there's no breadcrumbs in there, then the cream is not gonna have anything to absorb into and you're just gonna have really wet meatballs. So if you omit the breadcrumbs, omit the cream. I'm using a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. You could use milk, that's fine, but since I make the sauce with a little bit of cream at the end, I figured we'll just keep it all heavy cream for the recipe. Then I'm adding 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce and 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard. And then the spice blend, which is really easy. You might find it a little bit odd. I did a little research on Swedish meatballs, and it's pretty traditional for them to have some allspice in there, which is not a flavor that I ever remember getting from my mom's Swedish meatballs. And I know personally, because I've made them all throughout my life, I've made Swedish meatballs. I've never put it in. Again, game changer. These are delicious. Doesn't go in the sauce, just in the meatballs. So I have 1 teaspoon of fine grind sea salt, 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. Even if you think they sound a little odd and you're not sure you're gonna like it, please, please, please give it a try, okay? It really was a game changer, absolutely delicious. Then I'm gonna put in 3 garlic cloves that I'm just gonna mince here real quick. About a teaspoon. If you have the minced garlic that's already minced up for you in a jar, just put about a teaspoon in there. It'll be fine. Okay, now we have 1 more ingredient, and I'm gonna just sort of mix this up a little bit, let that cream absorb into those breadcrumbs, but we do want to get in some onion flavor. You could do this a couple different ways. You could put in onion powder. That would be perfectly fine. You could even put in dehydrated onion. But what I like to do is grate my onion and put it in. So it's a fresh onion. I'm using a sweet onion. You could use any kind of onion you want. Even a red onion would be fine. I like the grated onion. I don't want to dice it up because I feel like you can never get really fine enough dice unless you have amazing knife skills. So to make it look just easier, I just grate it. So I take off both ends here, peel it, and peel the first layer. You're gonna want about a half of a cup or so of the grated onion. You could use the small side or you could use a larger one. It really doesn't make any difference which one you use. I'm just gonna use the smaller one here. All right, so that's about a quarter of a cup. And I don't squeeze it out. I just leave the liquid in there, that's fine. If you weren't going to use the breadcrumbs, you might wanna squeeze your onion a little bit because you really wanna reduce the amount of moisture that you have. You'll get more meatballs if you add in a half of a cup of crushed pork rinds or something like that, or even some almond flour, but it's not gonna be absorbent. So you don't wanna add in the extra cream, even if you're using those, and you wanna squeeze your onion if you're using an alternative to the breadcrumbs. Okay, there we go. So that is about a half of a cup, maybe a little bit more. It's not gonna make any difference though. So 1 medium-sized onion is what you're gonna wanna use. All right, now you can mix your meatball mixture any way you want. I could sit here for, I don't know, 30 minutes and try to incorporate everything with a little utensil, but the best way to do it is with your hands. So that's what I'm gonna do. While I mix this up, I'm gonna preheat the Ninja Foodi with the inner pot in. We're gonna do that on sear saute on high. So we're just gonna let it preheat for a little bit before we put in some olive oil. All right, about 2 tablespoons of the olive oil is gonna go into the inner pot. That is pretty important because we don't want our meatballs to really stick to the bottom. We don't want them to fall apart. We are just going to brown them on the outside. Another way you could do this is in the oven, but you do want to save the juices, okay? So if you wanted to bake them in the oven, put them on a little rack on a tray, let the juices fall underneath, and then you're gonna use those juices to make the roux, which thickens the gravy for the Swedish meatballs. But I'm gonna do it all in the pot so it makes it a little bit easier. I like to use my scoop here, which is about 2 tablespoons. It makes a 1 ounce meatball. You can make them as big or as small as you like. That's not gonna make any difference. If you make them twice as big, so if you want really big meatballs, you're gonna have to increase your pressure cook time a little bit or saute them a little bit longer. I found that this size works the best. They're cooked all the way through perfectly, and there is enough pressure cook time that we can get our egg noodles or potatoes done on top at the same time. So 2 tablespoons or about 1 ounce balls, and then I just make the meatballs. You can make them all up ahead of time, or you could sit here and roll them and plop them right in. My oil's not quite hot enough, so I'm gonna make up a tray and then put the rest of them in there to cook. You're gonna want to do this in batches. I've done this recipe 2 different ways. I have done it where I make the roux right from the meatball juices in the pot, and then I remove the roux. That, you have to take the meatballs out after sauteing to do that. Then I also did where I just made a roux, okay, with butter and flour, 4 tablespoons of each, without the juices from the meatballs. What happened though to the gravy? They were delicious, don't get me wrong. But what happened after it cooled down, they look a little coagulated. Like it was just a very fatty gravy. So I recommend doing it the way that I'm showing you in this video, but if you wanted to take a shortcut and you didn't want to put the meatballs in and out, you could make the roux on your stove. Just use 4 tablespoons of butter, 4 tablespoons of flour, cook it for 2 to 3 minutes, and it will turn a light tan color, and that's all you need to do because it's a light roux that we're gonna make. The 2 pounds of meat with the additions that I put in will make about 38 meatballs this size, so you can plan accordingly if you wanted to cut it down or even increase it. All right, I think the olive oil is hot enough, so now I'm gonna put this over and decrease your temperature, okay? I'm gonna take it down to 4. Just because 5 tended to put just too much color on the meatballs too quickly, and they were looking a little dark on the burnt side almost. So we don't want that. We just want them to be nicely brown. And I'm putting them over to the side because that's where the oil collects on the Ninja Foodi because of the design of the pot. And then when I flip them, I pull them towards the center. That seems to work pretty well. Try to be really gentle with them. They are fragile little meatballs at this point, and you don't want them to break apart. Once the meatballs have seared for about 2 minutes on each side, 2 to 3 minutes, you can remove them, and then we're gonna do the same with the next batch. Now you will notice that there's areas that are still pink. That is fine, because we are pressure cooking these. We are gonna fully cook them, so don't worry about cooking them all the way. We just don't want them to fall apart. So in order to avoid having them fall apart under pressure, we need to get that nice little sear on them. And the browning, of course, adds flavor, and it gives us the fat that we need to make the roux. So it's like a win-win-win-win. Okay, now we're gonna put in 4 tablespoons of flour. Do this pretty quickly because you don't wanna burn anything. I also like to turn the heat even down, or you could honestly turn it off, but I think we could just turn it down to 3 and then get the flour mixed with whatever juices are left. Now, this is where it's going to vary for you, okay? But in all my test batches, I feel very comfortable telling you to put in 2 tablespoons of butter or 2 more tablespoons of olive oil. Either one is fine. I like the flavor of butter, so I'm gonna add in some butter. You need a good 4 tablespoons of flour and then 4 tablespoons of fat to make the roux for it to thicken the end gravy enough. So we don't wanna skimp on that, and we don't have 4 tablespoons of fat from the meatballs. So we need to supplement that a little bit, and you will see it come together and it will look like sand. And that's what it looks like. So that is fine. 2 tablespoons is fine. You may need 3. You may need 4. Okay, I doubt it, but you might need 3. I doubt you'll need 4 because there will be some fat from the meatballs and from the olive oil left over. Now we're just gonna saute this for a short period of time, like 2 to 3 minutes, and remove it from the pot, okay? That is very important. We're gonna remove it because we cannot go under pressure with any thickening agents like this. So we need to take it out, we put it back in later, okay? That's why I said you can make it on the stove. That's perfectly fine. And you don't have to like scrape the bottom at this point. You don't have to get all the fond off. We'll deglaze after we remove this. All right, so that looks good. It's a light tan. It was just about 2 minutes or so, and it is a good consistency. So I would say, I mean, who's cooked sand? Nobody, right? But that's kind of the consistency of a wet sand is what it reminds me of. Kind of like if you're at the ocean and the ocean goes onto the sand and then starts to pull back, you know, that wet sand that you get, that's the consistency that you want. And now I'm gonna remove this. It doesn't look very pretty, but all those darker specks, they are full of flavor. They are not burned though. If for some reason you had your heat too high and you burn the meatballs, you would wanna scrape that out before you made your roux, okay? So use your judgment in that. I can tell that mine is not burned. It is just dark brown. All right. With the heat still on, now we want to deglaze the pot. You're going to use a total of 2 cups of thin liquid. I have 1.5 cups of beef broth and 1/2 cup of white wine. That is my preference, okay? I like the wine in this. You don't have to use the wine. Don't worry about that at all. I'm using a Riesling. You could also use a cooking wine that you get at the grocery store. I have done that in my test batches and it worked out just fine. So if you're not a wine drinker and you don't have wine at home, please do not run out to get an entire bottle of wine that's gonna go bad because you only need 1/2 cup. Just get some white cooking wine from the grocery store and it'll work perfectly fine. Put the cap back on it, put it in your pantry for the next time you wanna make your Swedish meatballs. And if you don't want the cooking wine at all, just add 2 cups of beef stock. Now, what we are gonna do here is definitely scrape the bottom of the pot completely. We want all of that dark fond, as it's called, or brown bits, as I like to call it, off of the bottom and into the liquid, which the liquid is thickening some. So you're gonna see your white wine start to thicken. Don't worry about that because we're gonna add all of this thin liquid. So it's not gonna get too thick where it's gonna, impede pressure cooking or anything, but it's picking up any leftover roux that we left in the bottom of the pot. All right, then pour in your beef stock broth, whatever you want to use. You could use chicken too if you wanted to. I just figured since I have ground beef, I'm going to use beef. And the bottom of the pot looks nice and clean. We have a thin enough liquid to go under pressure. Now we can add our meatballs back in, and then I'll talk about what you can do to add either potatoes or egg noodles on top. So once your meatballs are back in, try to get them as much in a single layer as you can. This is more important if you want to layer with the rack, okay? If you're not putting anything on top, you're just gonna go under pressure just like this. Does not matter if they are stacked. They don't have to be in a single layer, it's fine. All right, that's good. Now, it doesn't matter, you can leave the Ninja Foodi on. It can be heating this liquid. That's just gonna put your pot under pressure a little bit quicker. It's perfectly fine, it's not gonna overcook anything. Really quickly, let me talk about what you can put on top. You can, any pan that fits, I'm using an 8-inch Fat Daddy-O pan. I'm using about 2.5 to 3 cups of egg noodles, which is 6 ounces. You could probably go up to 8 ounces with this 8-inch pan and it would be okay. You might have a little mound of cooked pasta afterwards, but that's no big deal. Then if you're gonna do egg noodles, okay, make sure that they are covered with water. No specific amount of water, because it depends on the size of your pan. Mine's 8 inches. If yours is 9 inches, you're gonna have them spread out. You might not need quite as much water. You might need a little bit more. I'm putting 4 cups in. That seems to be good. And I probably could have used 2 more ounces in here and still been fine with the 4 cups, okay? So just make sure all of the egg noodles are covered. Then you're gonna wanna cover your pan, then set it on the reversible rack and get it into the pressure cooker. This can sometimes squish some of the meatballs, okay? But it's not bad enough that I thought it wasn't worth doing because it gives you both components, your pasta, your starch, and your meatballs. And then you just like steam up some broccoli or make some peas or something and you're done with dinner. All right, we're gonna close the lid. Depending on the type of pressure cooker that you're using, you will put on your lid and secure it. Make sure the valve is in the seal position. That's very important. I put the slider over to the pressure cook position. High is what we want. And we're gonna go to 3 minutes and hit start. So now we've got our meatballs in, we've got our egg noodles on, but what if you want to make mashed potatoes instead of egg noodles? No worries. I've tested the recipe that way. It works beautifully. I made the best mashed potatoes and I did them right on top. So I cooked the potatoes right on top of the meatballs in the same pan. So get an 8-inch or 9-inch pan, whatever will fit in your pressure cooker comfortably on a rack above the meatballs, okay? So if you have a higher, clearance, you have 8 quart, you may be able to get a deeper pan. You might be able to cook more volume if you wanted to, okay? I'm using an 8-inch by 2-inch Fat Daddy-O pan. I found that to be fine. I did 3 pounds of russet potatoes. The secret is you need to cut the potatoes into very small 1-inch pieces, okay? and then cover them with water. And do the same thing I did with the pasta, okay? Cover them with water, then put some sort of a lid on, whether it's a silicone lid or it's a foil. Either way works perfectly fine. Put them on the rack, put them on top of the meatballs, and then go pressure cook for 3 minutes. And when you bring whatever it is, whether it's the egg noodles or the potatoes, out of the pressure cooker, don't uncover them, okay? With the egg noodles, we can uncover and toss them around, but we're gonna cover them right back up, okay? Because they need that extra time to sit and really finish cooking. Same with the potatoes. So just keep them covered, put them to the side, finish up your sauce, then your sauce can be on, keep warm with the meatballs while you mash up your potatoes. Okay, so it takes about 3 minutes or so to release all the pressure, which Jeff thought was funny because he's like, it takes longer to release the pressure than it took to cook. Yeah, that happens sometimes. All right, now we can move our slider over and we can safely open up the lid. Always do that away from you. It's going to be very, very steamy. Now we're gonna pull out whatever you cooked on top. If you cooked anything on top, we're gonna pull that rack out. Mine are the egg noodles on top. And remember, I told you that they won't totally be done right now. So don't freak out if you open it up and it doesn't look done. That's completely normal. What I like to do is, although these do look done, they look perfectly done. All right. So they look way done. So I'm going to actually keep them uncovered. I will tell you what happened. I tested the recipe with extra wide egg noodles and I ended up only having a bag of medium egg noodles. And I thought, well, they're smaller, but they'll be okay. They cooked perfectly, but they're probably, well, we'll find out when we taste them, right? We'll find out. And I have plenty of liquid left, but they're evenly cooked. So my suggestion to cover with liquid is still a go, okay? But use wide egg noodles, okay? Or decrease your pressure cook time to 2 minutes. That's what I would do. All right, now, salt and pepper. We have not added any spices to the gravy whatsoever. What I like to do is either before pressure cooking or now, so it's up to you, add in a half of a teaspoon of fine ground sea salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. I have found that that gives the perfect balance of spices, but you can salt and pepper to taste. You can add whatever you want to this. Then we have to add in this magic roux that's gonna thicken up our liquid. And you'll see it's in a nice little clump here. Just put it in, it's already cooked. We'll just get it dispersed throughout the meatballs and the juices, and it will start to thicken pretty much immediately. Keep your pot on keep warm while you do this. Oh my gosh, this looks so good. And then just gently stir it around. Now, the final touch. Heavy cream, not sour cream, heavy cream, 1/2 cup. I've always made my Swedish meatballs with sour cream, always. And it's good that way. And if you want to make it with sour cream, you certainly can. But let me just tell you, this recipe for Swedish meatballs is the best in the world, in my opinion. At least the best that I've ever had. So I recommend trying the cream out. It just gives this really luxurious taste to the gravy, and the white wine gives the little bit of pungency and acidity that you would get with sour cream. So you might want to use a little bit of sour cream. If you're not using the white wine, you might find that that helps, but oh my gosh, I just thought this was amazingly delicious. Best in the world, I say, which is a pretty hefty claim, right? Especially since I haven't been all over the world, so really, take it for what it is. It's the best in my world. All right, let's go ahead and get out some of these noodles. I would recommend draining them immediately from the liquid so that they don't continue to cook in there. Oh, you know what? They're not overcooked at all. Wow, they're good. They're perfect, but if they sat there covered, they would overcook, okay? Because egg noodles will continue to absorb that liquid and then they just get too plump, they get too soft, and they just, you know, they don't go well with your gravy. But those are pretty good. All right, then you're gonna dish out some beautiful meatballs with your beautiful gravy. And it is that easy, my friends. Oh my gosh, looks so good. Now you could get a little fancy and sprinkle some parsley on top. That would always be beautiful because it would add that green pop of color, but I'm not gonna bother today. And I can tell when the gravy hit the plate, there was still some liquid on the noodles, and so it kind of thinned it out. So definitely drain those noodles so that it doesn't thin out your gravy too much. All right. Oh. Oh my gosh. These are so good. I'm just gonna say it. Best in the world. The texture of the meatballs is amazing. They're like soft and kind of a little fluffy. They're not dense. They are just so magically delicious. I like that word, magically delicious. Perfectly seasoned, perfectly balanced. The best Swedish meatballs in the world. Give them a try.